The American flag. The Statue of Liberty. The Lincoln Memorial. And of course, Harborough Auto. The Dynasty Podcast is brought to you by Harborough Auto. Winner of the 2014 Dealer of the Year Award, Harborough Auto has a glorious inventory of certified pre-owned cars and trucks. Stop dicking around. Do your duty as an American citizen and check out Harborough Auto today.
It's time to get things started on the most sensational, inspirational, celebrational, sexuational. This is what we call the Dynasty Podcast.
Welcome to episode number 2 of the Dynasty Podcast in the special draft analysis edition. Of course, brought to you by Harborough Auto. This is Commissioner Eric Costanza and co-hosting with me. Very excited about this on the Harborough Auto co-host hotline, Mr. Jae-Young Kim. Hello, Jae-Young.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for doing this here. Bub's not co-hosting every show as we went over, last week, so gives some of our other coaches some opportunities to kind of join in on the fun. You obviously co-hosted with me once last year, and I think both myself and the listeners thought you did a fantastic job, so we figured we'd invite your Asian ass back, Jae-Young.
Well, this Asian ass is glad to be here.
Excellent. Now, you are a big fan here of the NFL, obviously, as most of us are. It's great to have football back in our lives on Sundays and Mondays and Thursday nights, starting up here, this week. Let me ask you, Jae-Young, how many other fantasy leagues are you doing, and on a scale ranging from the size of the Grand Canyon to the size of the universe, how much better is the Dynasty than all these other leagues you're doing?
Well, I'm in 2 other leagues, and really, the amount of time I spend on this league is infinitesimally more than the time I spend on my other 2 leagues combined, just because of how much more complex and obviously fun it is, and how much more I want to beat people like Matt within. So I would say size of the universe, really.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. I in the past, I think there's been a little bit of a myth, if you will, that I legitimately get mad when some of you guys, who I totally understand, are in other leagues. I don't. But I do think we shouldn't talk about them that much here on this podcast, or even in general, just because why would we talk about some other minor league, fantasy league, when we got the goddamn best league here going, So, Jae-Young, you're co-hosting with me. You're not a guest, so you are on an equal playing level with me. Feel free to interrupt me or call me out or do it, anything you want. I want you to feel at home here as we co-host this show together.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric.
All right, so we have a lot that we're going to, get into here on this draft analysis show. We're going to now analyze the draft, obviously. We're going to review all of the fun, the tomfoolery that occurred, which obviously was a lot. We're going to give our opinions and discuss some of the steals and reaches of the draft. We're going to make some predictions. We're going to talk to some of the coaches about their draft. Preview week 1. We're going to get some of Bubba's bold predictions. And then on the interactive segment, the first of the season this year, Jae-Young, proud to announce that the CBS fantasy analyst, we all love him, friend of the show, Dave Richard. Jae-Young, are you excited to interview his ass?
I most certainly am. Obviously, the senior fantasy writer at CBS, critical fantasy resource. I'm a big fan of this.
As am I. He's actually kind of gotten bigger and bigger. He actually won the 2013 Fantasy Football Writer of the Year. And we all know how obviously big fantasy is, how many other people and sites and magazines and all the stuff that's out there. So the fact that he won that award is pretty big. And he was the second most popular guest on the show last year. We all remember who number 1 is. Jae-Young, do you remember?
Of course, Mr. Ed Hockley himself.
Absolutely. So maybe we'll let Dave know that when we get him on. I hope he won't be offended by that, but he seems like a good enough guy. So we got a lot going on here, so let's get this shit started.
This is the draft day. Analysis jingle. Oh yeah.
So Jay Young, as always, I personally had a great time, at the draft. You?
Of course, had a great time.
Yes. Now, you were you actually moved, right, last night and into today, so that was the reason why you weren't able to make it to the post-draft party. Obviously, understandable.
Very disappointed I couldn't make it myself. But, yes, I was moving into East Boston, and I will say moving on the 1st is literally the worst thing I've ever had to do.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you. You were a very busy man this weekend, and obviously fitting in and not complaining or bitching about having to, get this, do the draft as well. We all appreciate. So let's talk a little bit. There's a lot to talk about. A lot occurred on draft day, as always. I guess let's first talk about some of the fun and randomness that occurred, which never ceases to, disappoint. I guess, Jay Young, what's something a highlight of yours that maybe transpired during draft day?
All right, so Scoop, I'm going to have to call you out on this one. I'd say the most surprising thing, and one of the things that gave me a surprising amount of enjoyment, was the fact that you got nerfed. I was really surprised about that.
Yeah. I was nerfed, I think, for the first time ever last year, but yeah, I guess I'm making up for it for like the 7 or 8 years that I went without getting nerfed at all. But I got nerfed twice, which was actually no one else got nerfed twice besides myself. The first was when I went to redraft Jordan Reed, which was ridiculous on my part because I just made a reference to Phil the round prior that I liked that pick, so I should have been aware. But then the second one was, I think, a couple rounds later when I drafted Jarrett Boykin and I misspelt his first name. I will say, some of you guys print out your draft sheets, specifically from sites. I'm not making an excuse, I'm just saying, I make my own, customized draft sheet where I literally type in every name. So that's probably what happened. I must have messed up with the second T in Jarrett. So I think that was the one that I got nerfed directly in the left eyelid. It didn't hurt.
And I will say, to give you some credit there, that is not a common name,
It's not, but as Zach said, with all the colorful characters in the NFL, there's certainly a increase in the different names. So definitely, I surprised myself there as well. Although I will say, Jay Young, that I even though I got nerfed twice as commissioner, it's not something that typically happens to me. But I will say I don't think I was the most embarrassed of everyone who got nerfed. I think that nod goes to Coach Phil when he redrafted Dez Bryant in the I have it here, it was the 21st pick overall, but it was the 9th pick, I believe, in the second round. That was ridiculous. I think he said he went for a bear or something like that, right when the draft kind of started, and then I guess he missed the Dez. He went up there so confidently, and we were all, and he was writing Dez Bryant. I looked down at my draft sheet did I mess up? He can't really be doing this. What was going through your head, Jay Young?
I was surprised. I think he said something like, "Oh, this is an easy lock" or something like that. He was just so confident.
Yeah.
He came in with such a stride, so much swagger, and then when he stepped away and I saw Dez Bryant there, I will admit, quite a bit of surprise. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I launched Brian Tavalieri's Nerf grenade over my head at him when that occurred, and. Yeah, that was. I'm pretty sure that breaks a record for the quickest nerfing. I want to say Zach actually had the record last year when he drafted Stephen Ridley and he misspelled his name, but I think that was later in the second, or maybe in the early third. So pretty sure Phil now has that record. Kind of an unofficial.
Congratulations,
record.
Phil.
Yes, good job, Phil. So there were actually 5 nerfings, which I think that actually the Dynasty odds makers, I believe I forget exactly how many they said, but I want to say the under probably took that. Still a good amount, but not a crazy amount either. Obviously Phil, and then myself, and then Will also, he misspelled Phillip Rivers. I think his first name in the 10th round. So with that, actually, Johnny C now holds the record for the longest going without getting nerfed. So look at that, Jay Young. Johnny C is in the lead with that.
Good record to have, Johnny. Of all the ones that you can have, that's what you should be proud of.
Exactly. I actually texted him earlier to see if he could maybe give us a little, feeling or a little quote on having that record. And he basically just replied saying, yeah, you got to pay attention, you fucking retards. So there it is. And then Matty Whiffen, he also got nerfed towards the very end of the draft. I'm thinking the 16th round when he redrafted Christian Michael. So no shortage of nerfings as usual. And then a couple of other things that took place in addition to the nerfings were in the 4th pick in the 2nd round, Jay Young. I don't know if you noticed this, but I think Bob said something like he didn't see it going this way, and it was obviously very early in the draft. And that sparked a little fire under Brian's ass. He completely went off on Bob, completely just called him out, and just went on a major rant. I thought that was pretty funny.
I loved it. Having 3 of the top 4 picks, and being completely unprepared for how that 3rd pick was going to go, I couldn't help but laugh, Scoop. What about yourself?
Yeah, same here. When Brian loses it, it's fun. It was obvious not seriously, but in a comical way. It was hilarious. And then Johnny C and Matt, they obviously were in a bit of a the same boat, if you will, as far as not having a lot of picks, and likely, obviously, they already traded their keepers, so they were sitting behind. Actually, both of us, you and I were sitting next to each other. They were sitting on the couch for most of the draft, and I had the pleasure of just kind of overhearing. They were just color commentating almost the whole time, especially before they really started drafting. And when those two bastards get together, it was pretty hilarious. Some of the things they were saying. I think at one point they played the murder fuck Mary game on regarding some of the coaches. And then I think at one point I heard Johnny C literally analyzing Bubba's belly button lint at one point. I think he even got offered an 11th round pick for it, but he denied it. Did you notice that?
I did. So I think John was able to discern from the day-old belly button lint that he was wearing a blue shirt the day prior. I was also very flattered that John wanted to marry me. I'm a little disappointed he didn't want to fuck me, but I get it. He wants to fuck Zach. Great choice. I'm not gonna dispute that. I will say, I think coach commentary, or rather, the coaches on the couch commentary should be required going forward. The 2 coaches that have the least amount of picks. I also think they should live tweet next time.
Love it. I love those ideas. Also, we saw the second time the Coach Brian Tavolieri draft pick for a beer rule came into play when I traded a half-full bottle of vodka to Chris for an 11th round pick. I thought I'm trying to set the precedent a little bit better than last year's 5-hour energy drink going for an 11th round pick. Obviously, that bottle was pretty big, and that was half full, and I think that should be worth an 11th round pick more than just a little dinky piece of 5-hour energy filled with like cocaine and battery acid.
I would bet that he would say right now it was well worth it, Eric.
Well, for me, it kind of had hopeful dual purposes. Not only I would get an 11th round pick out of it, but also I was hoping to get Chris completely even more drunk with that. So I don't know if that worked or not, but that was my intentions. And then on the rule book, as we know, we always have to sign it, just to make sure we're locking in. We all agree to the rules for that particular year. And every year, there's no shortage of comical things that I see when I go back the next day or that night later and look to see what's on the rule book. This year, we saw quite a number of different things. Some scribbly marks, a smiley face. Somebody signed the rule book as the ghost of Odin Lloyd. That was interesting. Of course, that was the individual that Aaron Hernandez murdered, or one of them. And then Johnny C, he decided to go ahead and put a nice swastika on as his signature. So some great things there, Jay Young.
Never a bad decision to sign your name with a swastika.
You can't go wrong with that. And then what about the time Will, good old Will, he went to go draft in my slot. What the hell happened with that?
Yeah, I was a little disappointed you didn't continue with the FR drafts, but I get it. You had to rescind his choice there.
Yeah, I mean, it was really either Frank or Fred Jackson I could have gone with, and I wasn't gonna. I mean, it would have been funny, but I'm not gonna fuck up my own draft. But yeah, we may have to address this in the off season. Like that's a serious violation if you ask me. That's bullshit. That really threw me off my game for a little while, and then. John came close to breaking Bub's record last year as far as going the longest without having any draft pick, although in a way maybe he did because John traded his keeper as well, whereas I don't think Bubba did that last year from what I recall, although maybe he did, I don't remember. Either way, John made his first pick in the 6th round, pick number 69, and Bub last year made his first pick number 78 in the 7th round. So pretty close, but Bub still holds that record, and kind of coincidentally enough, they both drafted Jae Young. Do you remember?
No, you're gonna say it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Colin Kaepernick. They both took the same player, so that's kind of funny that happened. There was one point we're gonna get into the draft, but I want to say one more thing. There's one point towards the end of the 5th round. I think there were maybe like 5 or 6 picks left in the round before we broke for pizza. We were already really late for when the pizza was going to be ready, so I decided to just kind of go and get the pizza. And apparently a trade occurred during that time in which I found out when I got back, and Bubba was so proud. He said he was in charge, and he did a good job, and that there was a trade between Chris and Brandon. And he really had that gleam in his eye, like you'd be so proud of me, Papa. But I found out that he didn't even ask Phil what as the Dynasty Trading Committee, what his thoughts were, and he apparently didn't mark off a pick for Chris later on in the draft, which then made Chris kind of pick an extra player. I think it was Big Ben, so we basically didn't input Big Ben as a draft pick into the draft results, so he's a free agent. So, Bub, I'm really disappointed with you. You really got to pick up your game, Jae Young. Maybe you might want to put your hat in the ring for a possible new commissioner apprentice, because Bubba, I've been training for quite a long time. He really took to, I trained him for 4 squares, and he took to that. But I don't know what's going on with him. He had his shot right there, and in my eyes, he completely failed.
I'm going to be honest here, Eric. I'm a little concerned. If you get assassinated, you're leaving us in really bad hands. I think we're going to have to make sure we figure out the cloning process or something to ensure that your mind is retained in case you die in some horrific accident.
Jae Young, you're the technology analyst. If I ejaculate into some sort of container, I will write on a note on a Post-it saying, for Dynasty reasons only, it is okay to clone me in order to carry on commissioner duties. So, Jae Young, let's go ahead and get into the actual draft here. Obviously, I mean, before we even kind of got started, there were 3 keeper players who got traded. That is a record. That's never happened before between Peyton, Arian Foster, Matt Forte. There were 8 trades throughout the duration of the draft that involved future draft picks. I think that sheet that we had up on the wall really helped as far as kind of record keeping that. Do you agree?
Absolutely did.
Yeah. As far as the mock was concerned that Bub and I did last week, we only got 2 out of 12 correct in the 2nd round, which is pathetic. We got, and one of which we already knew, with the Calvin Johnson pick. So we get that right, and then we also got that Zach took Des Bryant. I will say, Bub, he wanted to pick Brandon Marshall for you, Jae Young, but I kind of talked him out of it, so I kind of blame myself that we didn't get 3 right, but we really didn't do a good job at all with our mock, at all. So let's talk a little bit. So who do you think, just in general, off the top of your head, or maybe you have some of the draft results in front of you right now, who do you think maybe stands out to you as like having a really solid, good draft?
I'm going to, obviously we know there are a couple people that had a lot of picks. The Paluchas, I thought, did well with those picks. I'm going to say something probably a little surprising, though. Obviously, he traded a lot of his future picks, but looking at his team on paper right now, I will say I am incredibly impressed with Brandon's team. Peyton Manning at QB, Jamal Charles and Monty Ball at the running back positions, and then three pretty solid wide receivers, I think, in Keenan Allen, Andre, and Manny Sanders.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you, and I actually wanted to see if it was okay with you, Jayon, if we throw Brandon in the having both a good and a bad draft at the same time. Because when you look at it on paper, now that all the smoke and dust and shit and blood is cleared, you're right. He's got Peyton at quarterback, Monte Ball and Jamal Charles as his running backs. He's got Keenan Allen, Andre Johnson, and Emmanuel Sanders. They're all, in my opinion, like solid number 2 guys, but there's 3 of them. So, and then Ryan Matthews as a flex. However, I will say that, and this is where it comes into the bad portion, if you will, that I was referencing earlier, his bench to me is very bad to mediocre. And considering that he had a lot of picks and that he was done drafting essentially around 11 or 12th round, I thought he did a very bad job from the middle rounds on when he was kind of getting his depth and his bench. He's got Cutler, which is, I like that, but then Sean Green, Ronnie Hillman, okay, that's a handcuff, but then DMC, Riley Cooper, Steve Smith, that to me is, screams if he has an injury or during the bye weeks, like, he's going to be in some serious trouble. What do you think?
I agree. So I love Jay Cutler as the backup QB. I actually do not mind Sean Green at all. I don't know why there's so much hype about Bishop Sankey. So I'm okay with the Sean Green pick. Like you said, I don't hate the Ronnie Hillman pick, especially when he's the backup. But oh my God, DMC, Cooper, and Steve Smith are horrible, especially for where they're drafted.
Yeah, I agree with you regarding Bubba and Zach. Although with Bubba, he better not have come out of that without a great looking team. Zach, I think, did a solid job as well drafting. Another guy I'd like to throw out there, and maybe it's just because I picked him to make it to the Dynasty Bowl, but I thought Brian had a pretty quietly solid draft. If again you look at his team now, once it's all said and done, he's got Brady at quarterback, he's got Dougie Martin and Ben Tate at running back. Then he's got Victor Cruz, Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Hawkins. Oh, I'm sorry, Roddy White. Take that back. Andre Hawkins will be on his bench. And then Ladarius Green. He's got Trent Richardson. He's got F. Jacks, Bolden. So I don't know. I look at his team and I think that's got some serious potential to at least compete and possibly make some noise. What do you think?
I completely agree. I think there are a couple question marks at running backs where he could have gotten some solid value depending on if they can stay healthy. Ben Tate in particular, I'm very curious to see how he's going to do this year. It's one of the reasons I drafted Terrence West myself, to see if Ben Tate goes down. I also think T. Rich could be poised for a really good year, depending on if he can bounce back from his terrible showings the last couple of years. But Fred Jackson, I think, will always be solid. And I also think Kyrie Robinson was a good pickup for him.
Yeah. So what about maybe a guy that didn't have such a great draft? And we kind of made reference to Brandon being both good and bad, but anyone stand out to you? I know you don't like to really call people out and whatnot, but in good fun, there's got to be a guy that maybe you didn't really personally like what he did. What do you think?
Yeah, like you said, I don't want to call anyone out, but I will say that I didn't love Chris's draft. I don't love his running backs, and I think this is just a personal thing. I've just never been a big Jackson guy. I don't like Vincent. I don't love Deshaun. And I think Marcus Colston is one of those guys that always surprises me at how well he does. But I just don't think this is his year again, especially with Kenny Stills poised to have a good year. Brandon Cook's been doing well in preseason. So I just don't think it's going to be a Marcus Colston year this year. So, we'll see. If Gio Bernard goes down, maybe Jeremy Hill can pick things up. Obviously, Bernard Pierce could have a couple first 2 games. But I did not love his draft.
Yeah. I can see that. One guy that I wanted to mention, I'm not going to say Bubba didn't have a good draft. I'm not going to say that. But I don't know. I think it's more of, so there were a couple times that he didn't like, especially early on, he didn't like the pick he was making. And for example, I believe he said that when he picked DeMarco Murray with the 4th pick in the 2nd round. I feel like maybe sometimes he's maybe going off the board or what the consensus is, like, from analysts out there. And sometimes you just say, fuck that, I'm going with the guy that I like over the guy that maybe I don't like but I should take here. And Gronk, too. He took Gronk in the first pick in the third round, and he told me personally that he's not very high on him due to his injury, and he had I think Bubba had the ACL injury, so I'm pretty sure he took guys that he personally isn't very high on, which, considering the situation he was in, surprised me a little bit. He still has a great team, obviously, but I wonder if he's going to like the team, intimately,
I agree.
if you will.
It's hard to root for your team if you don't have a lot of players that you like, right? Like,
Right.
I would never draft Eli Manning, even if he was supposed to have an amazing year. I would just hate having to root for this guy. So I completely agree with you there. I will ask you, obviously, you're close with Bub. Do you know if he makes his own custom rankings, or does he go straight off the website?
It's a great question. I don't know that. But maybe we can ask him next time he's on. But I'd be curious to know that as well. Maybe Bubba, tweet us or let us know, because and I'm sure you're disagreeing with us, and that's fine. But I don't know. That's just kind of what our thoughts are. And the thing is too with Bub is he's obviously, you would think he's kind of going to be the guy who everyone wants to lose or beat this year, just because, again, of the situation he's in. So let's talk a little bit about some of the value picks, some guys that went later than maybe we thought they would, and it ended up being a really good pick. Do you have any off the top of your head, Jae Young, that you look at and like, wow, like this guy went here? That's a great pick.
I'd say one of the guys that I really like, and I know I just called him out, but I really like Chris picking Wes Welker at, I think it was 91. I think he's supposed to be back by week 1 now, and obviously we all know what damage Payne and Wes Welker can do. I think that could be an amazing pickup of the year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously health is the biggest concern there, but if Welker even if he misses a week in the beginning, which it looks like he may not, but even if he does, if he ends up being healthy, he's obviously going to be a great, receiver on that Denver offense, and you get a guy that late, I mean, that's could be great. I thought of how about Nick Foles in the beginning, I believe, of the 10th round. Ben Lagers, who I think also had a solid, quietly solid draft. I mean, that's his starting quarterback. You get a guy like that, in the 10th round, that's pretty good value, right?
I agree, and I would like to say, we didn't mention him before, but big shout out to Ben. I thought he had a fantastic draft. I love his team right now, and I completely agree. Nick Foles, I had him on my board as going in the 5th or 6th round. I think he got a top 10 quarterback with the 10th round pick there.
Right. I also think Phil also got a really good quarterback, his starting quarterback in the next round, the 11th round, RG3. He hasn't had a good preseason, but we saw what he did in his rookie year. He should be a lot more healthier than he was last year. He's got some more weapons. He's in a pass-friendly offense now with Jay Gruden. I mean, it's all there for him to have a really good season. And again, the fact that he got him in the 11th round is a really good value pick.
Right.
So what about some reaches, some picks that were like, ugh, you get taking him that early? Anyone in particular, Jae Young?
So I would say I think we called it out in the draft too, but Carlos Hyde I thought went really early.
He's on my
7th
list.
round pick for someone that's a backup.
Yep.
Obviously, we know Frank Gore can go down at a moment's notice, but this Frank Gore is a monster. He always gets 1,000 yards, regardless of his age.
Right.
And if it's possible, I just don't see Frank Gore going down. I just don't see Carlos Hyde taking that starting position from him.
Yeah, and I thought Chris may have possibly reached a little bit on Shane Vereen as well in the middle of the 3rd round. I had him projected as a 4th round pick, so not too far off. Although with that said, I will say, and I also on my list have Cordero Patterson I picked him in the last pick in the 3rd round. I also had him as like a 4th, beginning of the 5th round pick. But what I will say, and this could be the case with Chris as well, if you really, really like a guy, and this is kind of going back to my point with Bub as well, if you really like a guy, and especially, like, I didn't have a 4th-round pick, so I was very confident that if I did not take Patterson there, I would not get him. So if you really like a guy, maybe you need to, take him a little early, and you like the guy that you're taking. I mean that's what my defense would be for Patterson, but I totally understand if it's a reach pick, as well.
Yep, I completely agree. I think, especially the way our league works, the almighty Dynasty League, I think it's one of those leagues where if you're not going to have a pick for a while, like, for example, for you, if you were going to have a pick from 40 to 50, and you love Cordero Patterson, you got to get him early, because you're not going to get him. You're not going to get him unless you reach. So I am completely okay with you making that pick there.
I also think that Brandon, as we mentioned earlier, made a couple of really bad reaches. He picked the Seattle's defense at the end of the 6th round, and in a position that is just so in flux and random. Although I will say Seattle, I think, has been a top 6 defense the last 3 years. But I don't know. I mean, Seattle's defense is obviously good. It's really early, and then obviously taking Steve Smith at the beginning of the 9th. I mean, there's still some value there, and to take a guy in the 9th like that, I don't know. And Riley Cooper as well. We already mentioned that, but those were some interesting picks, I thought, from Brandon. So we do this every year, Jay Young. Let's talk a little bit about who we think is going to win Draft Pick of the Year. Complete shot in the dark. Bub and I have never gotten it right. Let's just go wing it here. Last year, Brandon won for picking Noshawn Marino in the 12th round, which is kind of weird considering he went 1-14. But who do you? Well, do you want me to go? I'll go first, and then you go after me. That's what we'll do. I go first, you go second. I'm gonna take. You guys are gonna throw up a little bit in your mouths here. This is a guy who has been projected to be like, hey, this guy's gonna break out this year, and that has happened every 3 or 4 years, and he never has. I don't know why. I think this might be the year. I kind of wanted him, but he went before I was willing to take him. It's actually Johnny C's pick of Mark Ingram in the 9th round. I think that he could potentially be like a top 10 running back. And if that happens, I do not see him being on Johnny C's team, probably past like week 4. But so it's the same thing that could happen like with Noshawn last year. But I don't know. That's who I'm gonna go with. I almost went with Darren Sproles in the next round. I think Phil took him in the 10th, but I'm gonna go with Ingram.
I like Ingram. Ingram is one of those perpetual guys that I always trick myself into drafting, and he always busts. But I think he has a great chance of being an awesome running back on obviously a high-powered offense. For my pick, I'm actually going to go with one of your players, Scoop. I'm going to go with Zach Ertz in the 9th. I think he could be poised to have a monster year in that offense.
Yeah, well, I hope so. And considering that was the pick in which I got nerfed in the eyeball, that would be worth it for me. Well, you know what, Jay Young, this show so far, I think it's going great. It's also going a little long, like it did last week, but that's okay. Bub mentioned last week, hey, these are special editions. Once we get into the season, that's where we hopefully will kind of shorten the show a little bit to maybe 40 minutes or whatever. This one is not going to be 40 minutes. It's going to be a lot longer than that, but it's hard to shorten down a show. But let's talk to a few of the coaches that we thought had interesting drafts. Maybe we'll start with Brandon. Jay Young, do you agree?
Let's do it.
Now it is time. Fucking right, it's time. So grab your balls and let's go. Coaches interview. Here we fucking go. Hey, Coach Brandon McDowell of Brutal Deluxe. Congratulations. You are on the Harborough Auto Coaches Guest Hotline. I am here with he's on the line. Co-host Jay Young Kim. Say hello.
Jay Young, how are you, sir?
What's up, Brandon?
So, Brandon, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about your draft. Obviously, you had quite a lot of, draft picks stocked up. You made a bunch of trades. Your keeper player heading in was Jamal Charles. Then you made that trade for Peyton Manning. Second round, you ended up going with Monte Ball. Talk to us a little bit about, was that an easy decision once Bubba went with Demaryius Thomas? If he went Monte Ball, were you going to go Demaryius Thomas? What was your train of thought?
I wanted Demaryius Thomas right there. So when he took that, it was him or Ball or DeMarco Murray.
Yep.
Coin flip.
Right. So you ended up, going with Ball over Murray, and then you had no third-round pick. Then in the fourth round, you went with Keenan Allen, and then later on in that round, you made a trade, I believe, with Johnny C, where you ended up acquiring Emmanuel Sanders. Yep. You got the Peyton, Monte Ball, Emmanuel Sanders hook up there in Denver.
Yep.
And then you went on, and in the fourth round, you all had another pick where you got Andre Johnson. The fifth round, you made another trade with Chris where you acquired Ryan Matthews. And then this is where things got a little controversial, Brandon. The sixth round, and I'll let Jay Young maybe ask the next question, but let's just address this. The sixth round, you made a trade with Ben where you basically moved up literally one slot. What did you trade for to get this, Brandon?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
Okay. Was it a future draft choice? I think. I'm looking at the sheet here, and I don't see it. So I guess we'll have to take that back and figure it out. I'll tweet it later. But
it's probably a late round pick this year. I don't even know.
Oh, okay. So maybe it wasn't a future pick then. But talk to us. So you made that trade. It was clear that the Dynasty Trading Committee were baffled, and I think literally said it's a foolish trade. But you still went forward with it, and then when it was your turn to actually make the pick, you weren't even sure who you wanted to go with. So what happened?
Probably just getting impatient.
Impatience. Okay, Jay Young, do you have anything in particular that you'd like to talk to Brandon about regarding his draft?
Brandon, I was going to say, in the fourth round, you pick someone that's having an incredible preseason, Emmanuel Sanders. Tell me, did you know you wanted him there in the fourth? Was he a main target for you, or was it just best player available at that time?
Yeah, I definitely had him flagged on my spreadsheet as someone I was going to target, especially the welfare sheets and such. So. But I pretty much knew I was going to go receiver with those three picks in that fourth round. So it really was kind of best available for me.
Fair enough. Well, Brandon, thank you for joining us, and we're going to talk to a few other coaches here now, but thanks for taking the time to talk to us. We actually labeled you as having a both good and bad draft, so I don't know if that's really possible, but I guess we basically analyzed it and said that you're kind of top heavy. You got a really awesome starting lineup and possibly one of the worst benches. So I don't know if you agree or not, but thank you for the time and good luck this season.
Hey.
Yes. Hey, Coach Ben Green of the Boston Loggers. You are live here on the Harborough Auto Dynasty Podcast. You are on the Coach's Guest Hotline, and with me is co-host Jay Young. Say hello to each other.
Oh, hello, Jay Young.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
Good.
So, Ben, let's talk to you a little bit about your draft.
Sure.
Jay Young and I have actually give you a little bit of kudos. We thought you had a kind of a quietly solid draft where it almost snuck up on all of us, where we didn't really realize it until maybe towards the end of the draft, or maybe even the day or so after, where you look at the online and, hey, Ben's got a solid team. Let's talk about it. So you had keeper Marshawn Lynch. The second round, you're sitting there with the 7th pick in the round. Talk to us a little bit how you decided to go with A.J. Green and maybe who else you were looking at. We know you picked Green last year, and he's good, but you personally didn't have a great season last year. So a little bit surprising that you went that route again, but also not very much so because A.J. Green is a fucking stud.
No, he is. I mean, he wasn't the reason why I was
True.
losing some matches last year, but my plan going in was, I had Lynch as the keeper, so I was definitely looking to go wide receiver with that pick in the second round. I knew some of the big studs would be gone, like Des Bryant and Demarius.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I'd have a choice probably between A.J. Green and Julio Jones. So Coach Zach made it easy for me by taking Julio Jones right in front of him. So, it's kind of who I planned on taking, and it kind of, he fell into my lap. So that's what I went with.
Yeah, kind of made the decision easy for you. Jay Young, when looking at Lagers' draft, anything that you wanted to kind of talk to him about?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, Ben. You have a lot of players on your team that I love this year, and you already answered this for AJ Green. But basically, when it came to Green and Cobb, both two players I really wanted. Green, I would have definitely gotten if he had dropped to me instead of Brandon Marshall. So I know you just said that you were targeting Green or Julio Jones. Was it the same for Cobb? Was he someone that you were just hoping was going to come down to you, and was it someone that you just easily smashed up on, or was it kind of a best player available at that time?
I mean, he was another one that I kind of was looking at when I was doing my prep, and I also had Cobb last year until he broke his leg, so that was another issue. So he was good for me last year, and he kind of fell in my hands just like a number of the players that I wanted. So I was real happy with my draft yesterday.
Yeah, you actually made a trade with, I think, Matt Whiffen to obtain Randall Cobb, and then you did the same thing in the following round with Zach to obtain Michael Crabtree, a guy that I'm also high on. So some really good picks there. At least that's what we think. Who the hell knows what will really happen once the season starts?
Exactly.
Now, in the 6th round, we actually just talked to Brandon before you. You were the fortunate benefactor of apparent impatience by Brandon, where you were able to basically move down one slot in the 6th round and obtain. Do you know what you got back? We couldn't figure that out earlier.
I got the 10th round pick.
Okay.
So, because I didn't have anything I traded my 10th in the deal I made with Zach, so I wouldn't have had a pick between the 8th and then the 12th, so it was good to get something in the middle there.
And in the 10th round, you selected, and we made references earlier, I didn't even realize at the time, Nick Foles, your starting quarterback, and a pick that Jay Young already deemed as one of the better picks of the draft. Great trade by you. Brandon, I think, kind of admitted, without saying it, that it was a bit foolish, but anyway, Ben, great job. You had a good draft. We'll see how it all pans out, and good luck this season.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
So, Coach Zach Palucha we now have here on the Harborough Auto Coaches Guest Hotline. Zach, my co-host in crime here in the show, Jay Young Kim, is here. Can you say hello to him, please? He's very fragile, so I want to make sure that you say hi to him.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Zach.
Thank you. Good job. So, Zach, we are coming off the heels of the draft. Let's talk a little bit about how you did. We both, Jay Young and I, thought you did a great job. We thought you had one of the better drafts and one of the more scary teams looking on paper. And actually, I'm going to say this right now. I actually think you have the best team right now on paper, better than Bub's. I think Bub is right there, but I think looking at it right now, you have a pretty sick-ass looking team. So let's talk about how you built said team. So you kept Eddie Lacy, and then you also made a trade with William DeYoung for Matt Forte, which not a lot of people knew about. I knew about because I was the other guy on the other end trying to do the same thing. And I have to say, and Zach, you and I already talked about this, and congratulations for you for doing this. But Will randomly stopped negotiations in the middle of them and said, Zach, he's yours. Instead
I kind of got the impression that he was getting tired of negotiating, so I kept kind of bugging him and saying, so what do you think, what do you think, what do you think? And finally, I think he just said, whatever, make it a knife and he's yours. And, okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Will DeYoung.
I couldn't respond fast enough to that email, so.
So you basically come into the draft with Lacy and Forte, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And then in the second round, you made actually a bit of a trade to move up a little bit from, I think, the third round, right? You made a trade with Chris where you were able to get both picks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 in the second round where you went Dez and Julio. Awesome trio, obviously. What made you make that trade? And obviously, I'm sure you're happy with who you got there.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was going to take a receiver there with my pick. I knew I was getting either Dez or Julio, and I really wanted them both. I didn't really have a definite, I didn't have Dez that far ahead of Julio, so I knew if I could find a way to get them both, that was my goal. And when Buck took DeMarco Murray, it kind of threw things off of Heaney, which I knew that would happen just talking from Heaney for the last month or so. I knew that it was basically DeMarco Murray or nothing. Mm-hmm. So once he had a couple of beers in him and I realized that he didn't really want that pick, I kind of just figured I'd offer something. I think he was just more willing to make a trade. I honestly think the beers had a lot to do with it. I think looking back, I think he probably should have just taken Dez and gone with it. But good game still.
Kind of surprised, that you're right that he didn't do that. But it worked out for you, Jay Young. When you're looking at Handiquacks' draft and maybe some of the trades and whatnot that he made, what stands out to you?
All right, Zach, I'm going to be honest. I think your top 6 players, I think you have someone at each position that could be a top 5 player. Stafford, Forte, Lacy, Dez, Alshon, Julio. I think these guys are studs, every single one of them. But when I look at your tight end and your flex position, I'm a little concerned. What do you think about those spots for you?
Yeah, tight end seems to be the bane of my existence in this friggin' league. I can never seem to figure that out. But I guess my philosophy in tight end has always been I'm only drafting one and I can wait because I figure everybody else feels the same way I do. I'm only going to draft one, and it turns out every year that everybody does 2, and I end up with nothing. So I'm not really happy with Charles Clay, but I mean I'm going to hope at some point that either somebody sells or somebody decides they don't need 2 tight ends on their team. So maybe I can pick one up or make a trade. Who knows? And as far as the flex goes, I mean, I'm hoping that one of those receivers or running backs kind of just has a good year, Macklin or Becker, who knows? I mean, it's going to suck for the first couple of weeks trying to play matchups, but kind of hope one of them just goes off and I don't have to worry about it.
Well, if you take the glass half full approach, kind of like the bottle of vodka that I traded to Chris was half full, not empty, fellas, not empty. You can look at it like, yeah, you weighed in on tight end, but while you did that, or due to doing that, or per doing that, you were able to get better depth on your bench, or maybe more solid flex or whatever, versus taking a tight end in the 7th, 8th round or wherever,
Yeah, I didn't have any after the top 3 tight ends. I didn't really have anybody on my board that really jumped out.
So you might as well just wait.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the Dennis Chitters and Jordan Camerons and Vernon Davis, I didn't want to reach for them. I felt like there was better value at other positions in the 5th and 6th round. So I wanted guys like Zach Ertz and Rudolph, and I probably should have taken one of them a little bit earlier. But I thought at that point I figured everybody had one, so I could just wait till my last pick, and I didn't hear any ass.
Right. Well, minus possibly Charles Clay, your team looks pretty amazing. Good luck this season. I have you pegged to go all the way to the Dynasty Bowl. We'll see if that happens or not, but either way, it's going to be fun. Zach, thank you for being on the show, and good luck this season.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Now, let's take a look into the future with next week's matchups.
So, Jay Young, we say this every year. I'll say it again. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, or I'll say it until it is no longer true. It rang true again last season, that's for damn sure. Every team that's ever won the Dynasty Championship in all 10 past seasons have won in Week 1 in the season that they ended up going on and winning the title. I mean, that can't be a fucking fluke at this point. And not only have they won, Jay Young, but the 5 champs of this past era 2, have all scored at least 106 points in Week 1. So it's not like they won 63 to 60. And if you average the points scored in all 5 of their Week 1 games in the season they won, it comes to an average of, you want to take a guess randomly?
I have literally no idea. I have nothing. I got nothing.
All right. I think you said 110. Good guess. 128 points. So, I mean, goes to show that if you put up a really good Week 1, it could lead to fortune and glory, as they say. My goal in Week 1 is to literally score 128 points. I don't know about you, Jay Young.
I think I can do that. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's go run down through the games. In the North Riverdale division, you got Handiquacks against Bubba Gump Shrimp. You got the transgender Satanists. I haven't gotten used to saying that yet or hearing it or reading it, but that's okay. Against the Boston Loggers. And then VIP against myself. And then in the South Division, Jay Young, Yellow Peril is going up against Soul Glow. Possibly unlucky for you, Soul Glow has won the last 2 opening day games, so beware of that. Brutal Deluxe is going up against Hong Kong, and the Pig Newtons are going up against rival Rockdale and Senators. And a little note regarding that game, this is actually will be the 20th time, all time, that these two teams are going up against each other, which is the most amount of times any two teams have played each other in Dynasty's history. So that is a fun fact for you all. Jay Young, I'm going to give you the floor. I'd like to hear what your game of the week for week 1 is.
I think this is a pretty easy one. I think it's going to be the Palucha Bowl. And since you said the winner of week 1, or rather, the Super Bowl winner is always won in week 1, I will say, I'll make a prediction here. Whoever wins the Palucha Bowl in week 1 will make it to the Dynasty Bowl. Whoever loses will miss the playoffs.
Wow, I like it. Jay Young throwing out bowl predictions. And speaking of bowl predictions, we're going to have our first little segment of Bubba's bowl predictions, which is going to be an every show thing, whether he's a co-host or not. So Jay Young, sit back and enjoy Bub's bowl predictions here for this week. I think he gave us a couple extra ones kind of for the season and for week 1. And then after that, let's talk to Dave Richard. Sound good?
Absolutely.
Matt Whiffen's quarterback will break Payton's touchdown record this year. Brandon will black out at the draft before his first selection. Get a notepad and pencil ready because it's time for another edition of Bubba's Bold Prediction. Jay Young will have a full-blown erection while making his 7th round selection at the draft.
I have 6 bold predictions for the NFL and the fantasy season this year. 3 week ones and 3 season longs. The Packers on Thursday night will beat the Seahawks by 3 touchdowns. Number 2, the Handiquacks versus Bubba Gump Shrimp matchup will score a combined 350 points. And Nick Foles will break the record for most passing yards in a game against Jacksonville. And my 3 seasonal predictions, Heaney will start the year 0-7. Matt Whiffen, reigning Dynasty champ, and the Hong Kong Cavs will return to their old ways and win 5 games this year despite being a terrible team. And the Scoopers will not finish as a top 3 team in their division.
The Dynasty Podcast brings you an interactive and likely ridiculous segment which borderlines on actual legit media. Buckle up your fucking seatbelts for the Dynasty Podcast interactive segment.
And now, on the Harborough Auto Interactive Hotline, he is the senior fantasy writer and analyst for CBS. He has been awarded from the Fantasy Sports World Association as the 2013 Fantasy Writer of the Year, and he was voted by you guys, our listeners, as the second best guest on the show last year. He is friend of the show, Dave Richard. Dave, thanks for being on.
It's my pleasure, guys, but I got to know, who was the first best guest?
Excellent question. I was hoping you were going to ask that. It was actually Ed Hockley. We had Mr. Biceps himself on the show last year, as well as obviously you, and it was a close vote, so for what it's worth. But yeah, Ed barely took home the prize. But hey, second best isn't too bad, right?
Well, let everybody know that I can beat him in a bench press contest anytime. We're bench pressing boxes of donuts, right? That's the kind of contest I could beat Ed Hockley in.
Nice. So, Dave, let's talk a little bit about the CBS Sportsline fantasy product, and then we'll kind of get into some of the good stuff. So CBS has updated their league homepage, I think, for a third straight year, and it is a little bit less customizable, but obviously there's a lot of good changes and upgrades, and I was hoping maybe you could just kind of briefly tell us about them.
Sure, and the thing that stands out to me is that they've made it much easier for everybody to interact in the league. You can tweet parts of the league out or use Facebook on it. So just the shareability, I don't know if that's really a word, but we're going with it, of the CBSSports.com Commissioner Leagues. It's big, and that's on top of everything else that you've come to know from CBSSports.com, which is super reliability, lightning fast scoring, customizable scoring. You can build your league any way you want, and it's cool, and it's still what's making fantasy fun and able to help people. Whether you're in a basic league and you just want to keep it private with your friends, or you're in a complex league with your scoring, that's what we're here for, to help you do your league right.
Excellent. Good stuff. So let's get into your bread and butter, tutoring us down the path of fantasy football righteousness. I think Jay Young has one of our first questions he'd like to ask. Jay Young?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So Dave, obviously there's been a few highly touted rookie running backs from last year. I think Monty Ball was drafted in the second, along with Le'Veon Bell and Gio Bernard. Zach Stacy was drafted in the fifth and had some success. So of those second-year running backs, who do you like the best for this year?
Great question, and there seems to be some growing concern that second-year running backs are kind of bad news for fantasy because, in the past we've seen them give hope for another big season, and then they go out and they get hurt or they stink. And you think about Doug Martin last year, and you think about Trent Richardson, and there's a lot of other guys in the past that have been bad as a second-year running back, but there's also been a lot of second-year running backs who have been good. And I think it's just a word of caution to anybody who just kind of makes a blanket statement about second-year running backs are a bad investment. Don't think that way. Everybody's different. Every individual is different. There's pros and cons to everybody. And it's just important to know that when you evaluate a player, you have to evaluate them on who they are, not what they are. My favorite one of the group is obviously Eddie Lacy. I think he's the best of the bunch. There is some injury concern with him. It wouldn't be fair for me to ignore what I brought up last year. I did a lot of research, just how banged up he was, just a ton of injuries coming into the pros, and then he was concussed early last season. But he stayed healthy, and he did an amazing job in Green Bay, especially considering that he was without Aaron Rodgers for much of the season. And as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be great. But the good news is that if you draft Eddie Lacy, you can spend your last pick in the draft, literally your last one if you want it to be, on James Starks. And you've got him handcuffed, and that's a good way to go for your team. My second favorite one is Monte Ball. I'm totally buying into what Denver's doing. Let's put it this way. If Noshawn Moreno had stayed in Denver, and the Broncos said, Monte, we're going to let you kind of stay on the bench, Noshawn's going to be our guy, where would you draft Noshawn Moreno this year? You'd do it with a first-round pick, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Maybe a second-round pick because it's Noshawn and you're scared of his knee or, whatever else he does. But now he's gone, and Monte's there, and the other running backs they have are just kind of okay. And even with the appendectomy, I think Monte Ball is still worth a first-round pick. I don't think he's necessarily an elite talent as a player, but when you're a running back next to Peyton Manning, you pretty much get a blank check for how many stats you want and how many touchdowns you get, and fantasy owners are off to the races. My third favorite one is Giovanni Bernard. I think he's going to keep up what he's doing in Cincinnati. I think he's going to get more carries, more catches, be more involved in the offense. I love him. If I had to take a running back, one of these running backs long-term for my team, it would be Giovanni Bernard. He would be the one that I would want the most. And I'm projecting him to get over 1,400 yards and 8 touchdowns this season. And then to round it out, you've got Le'Veon Bell, Zach Stacy, Andre Ellington. Those guys are all very popular guys. They're going to all get drafted by the end of probably round 4 in the case of Ellington. Maybe round 3 for Ellington. I'm going to say round 3 for him. And then the other guys, Stacy and Le'Veon Bell, those are probably going to be second-round guys. All good. The concern with Le'Veon Bell is that he'll share with LeGarrette Blount. The concern about Zach Stacy is whether or not he can really keep this up. I do think he's a talented back, and I don't think that Trey Mason's going to really cut into his workload. And I don't know if Ellington's going to hold up. I remember going to a Senior Bowl practice, and he looked great in the practice, and then he pulled his hamstring and was out of the Senior Bowl. We'll see if he can hold up for even 14 games, but if you get Ellington for 14 games, especially in a PPR league, you should end up with some really good stats. Last thing on him, during their preseason game, the color commentator, who's a big Arizona Cardinals guy, it's the Arizona Cardinals broadcast, said that he said that the coaches believe that Ellington can get 2,000 total yards this year.
Wow.
To me, that's exactly what I said. I don't think he can get 2,000 total yards. But if you were to tell me, listen, Andre Ellington's going to get close to 1,400 total yards and a decent amount of touchdowns, yeah, I believe that in a heartbeat.
Right. So Dave, obviously there are a couple different drafting strategies. What is your overall draft strategy for QB? Are you one of those guys that goes for that top 3 QB? Do you like to platoon? I mean, there are a couple interesting options this year with Tannehill and a couple of those other young QBs going forward. What is your go-to strategy?
It's really a long answer because the first things first is that it depends on what type of a league that you're in. If you're in a league where there's only 8 teams, 12 teams, or 10 teams, 8, 10, 12 or fewer, everybody's going to have a very good quarterback. So I tend to look at my quarterbacks and say, all right, I don't want to draft one unless I feel like I'm getting him at a bargain relative to his average draft position. For example, Peyton Manning's average draft position right now, it's a first-round pick. If I can get him in the second round, I don't think twice about it. I get him on my team, I feel good about it, and I don't worry about passing on a quarterback value later on. Same thing with Drew Brees. His ADP is, I think his might be in the first round too, but it could also be early second. If I get Brees in round 3 in a standard league, maybe round 4 in a PPR, then I feel good about that. I want a bargain. I want at least a little bit of a bargain with whichever quarterback I get. The better bargains are going to come later on, like Matthew Stafford, round 4 or round 5, Matt Ryan in round 6. I think Tony Romo, round 7, is a good bargain. I think even, you could look at Phillip Rivers and Jay Cutler, and I have a hard time figuring out which one I really want between those two as my starting fantasy quarterback. But if I can get them round 9, round 10, I'm a happy camper. So there's plenty of good quarterbacks to go around. Do not reach for one. You might target somebody like Tom Brady or Nick Foles or Matt Ryan. Just make sure you don't take them too soon because there will be a quarterback at a very good value waiting for you in your draft.
Excellent. Well, Dave, we'd like to continue to pick your brain in a kind of more of a rapid-fire format. We're going to switch off and name a couple players, and maybe after each player, if you could give us maybe your quick opinion and maybe where you personally would draft him. Let's start with Colin Kaepernick.
I like him as a 5th or 6th round pick. I know a couple people are starting to get sour on him. I don't see it happening. I think the Niners are gearing up to let him throw more. And he averaged 26 pass attempts per game last season. It's hard to be a great fantasy quarterback when you're only throwing that often. It's going to be more, and I think he's going to be very good. And the addition of Carlos Hyde will help him. The addition of Stevie Johnson. I'm not drafting Stevie Johnson in any of my fantasy leagues, but I think he'll help Kaepernick be a better quarterback. And I think he's still worthy of being considered a top 5 fantasy quarterback.
Give us your thoughts on Tom Brady.
I think Brady will be fine as long as Rob Gronkowski's fine. If Gronk's in there doing his thing, Brady should settle up as a top 10.
What about newcomer to Philly, Darren Sproles?
I like him as a backup. I don't think he's ever going to be in a position where he carries the workload for that offense. I think he's the reason why LaShawn McCoy shouldn't be the number 1 overall pick in a fantasy draft. And, PPR league, if you want to get him to be your flex, maybe a 14-team PPR, I don't have a problem with Sproles.
What are your thoughts on Stephen Ridley?
Don't like him. Afraid he's going to fumble the football. And when he does, Belichick's going to kind of lean on James White, who's one of my sleepers this year. I think James White is the real deal for New England. And even though he's in a contract year and all that good stuff, he's fumbled the ball 4 times each of the last 2 seasons. Last year he lost all 4 of those fumbles. The year before he lost only 2. I can't say that Ridley is a safe fantasy pick by any stretch.
What about receiver Percy Harvard?
Same thing. I don't know how often he's actually going to get on the field. There's a fantasy analyst named Adam Pfeiffer who works for Rant Sports who says that Harvin's never played more than 600 snaps in a season. And Seattle's a run-first team. So I'm going to let somebody else in my league spend a round 5 or 6 on Percy Harvin. I don't want him.
Okay, excellent. And first few rounds, as we all know, are kind of filled with the superstar impact type of players. As we all seen, it could be a huge advantage to pluck a guy in the later rounds who no one expected to have a breakout season and could lead your team to fantasy nirvana. A couple years ago, you nailed Alf Morris, and then last year you were just a little bit off with Tyler Eifert. Give us a guy maybe going in, say, around like 9 or later who you could project at maybe, winning a bunch of people's leagues by taking him so late and having him outperform where he's getting drafted.
Sure. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be a guy like Alfred Morris or Tyler Eifert, because those picks, we're talking those guys were like your last pick. And that's always the kind of player that I like to trumpet toward the end of August, that somebody just go get him on your team, go cut somebody, put him on your team if you've already drafted. And, with Alfred Morris, maybe we knew a couple of things when we were talking him up, and with Eifert, we thought we knew a couple of things and had it on good authority that he was going to be a big part of the offense, and it just didn't pan out for him.
Mm-hmm.
The guy I'm taking in round 9, every single draft, is Zach Ertz, the tight end in Philadelphia. I've heard so many great things about him. I've read so many great things about him, and I know firsthand that he and Nick Foles spent the offseason together and working on chemistry and hanging out and being buds. That's my round 9 pick.
I like
my
it.
round 8 pick, which is, it could be somebody else's round 9 pick, is Andre Williams with the Giants. Now that David Wilson's out and his football career is over, that's really opening the door wide open for Williams. I think he's a true professional runner. Rashad Jennings, this isn't to slight him. I think Jennings is a good running back too, but I see the Giants leaning on 2 backs all year long, and I think Williams is going to be a guy who delivers a lot of touchdowns. Not necessarily, I want to say he's going to be this year's Joyce Bell, but when you think about Joyce Bell, you also think about the fact that he had 50 catches. I don't think Andre Williams is going to have 50 catches, but 8 touchdowns, I think he can get there.
Good stuff. And finally for you, Dave, and this has been excellent. Bit of a silly, I guess, question. We had one of our listeners tweet us when they found out you were going to be a guest here on the show, and I don't know if you're going to have any idea what this person is talking about, but it's a N Palucha is his Twitter handle, and he says, "Hey Dave, I know you converse with many people through Twitter, but a while ago you and I had quite the back and forth regarding Bengals coach Marvin Lewis. Do you recall this? Because I use this fact every day to impress random strangers."
I think it happened after the playoff loss.
Okay.
I remember having a big back and forth about Marvin Lewis and whether or not the Bengals should have kept him as their head coach after they lost the playoffs. And my argument was that they should have, because this is a franchise that had a very hard time making the playoffs in the first place, and they had made it 3 years in a row. They just couldn't advance out of the first round with Marvin Lewis. And I think that if the Bengals had let Marvin Lewis go, I think the way I put it was Daniel Snyder would find a helicopter and fly over Marvin Lewis's house and drop a crate full of $100 bills from the helicopter onto Marvin Lewis's front lawn. I think that's what I think would have happened if the Bengals had let Marvin Lewis go. I think it's good that they didn't, but they might after this year. If the Bengals take a step back, or if the Bengals, maybe even if they don't win a playoff game, maybe the Bengals decide to go in a different direction.
So, look at that. So, N Palucha, Dave does remember you. Good stuff. Well, as always, Dave, it was a pleasure. You can follow Dave on Twitter at Dave Richard. And, Dave, where else can we hear or see from you?
Well, we are on iTunes. We have a podcast, just like you guys have, where we talk fantasy football every day during the football season. So if you're in a fantasy league or you just like to hear some die-hard football talk, we're the spot for you. You just look for Fantasy Football Today podcast from CBSSports.com on iTunes or wherever podcasts are downloaded. And since we're in everybody's ears already, I might as well let everybody know that every Saturday night during the football season, we're going to be live 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Radio on a show called Eye on Fantasy Football, breaking down what to expect each week in the National Football League, sleepers and duds each week, and guys that you can start. And we take phone calls, we answer tweets, and it's a great time. Everybody's pretty much busy on Saturday night, and we get that, but maybe you can take a break, walk out of the nightclub or out of the restaurant, and take a listen on your cell phone for a few minutes, because we do a really great show Saturday nights on CBS Sports Radio.
Great. No, yeah, we're looking forward to it. We'll definitely check that out. And we don't have Ed Hockley scheduled for this season, Dave, so I think we'll see how you get voted out this year. But this is certainly great stuff, and we definitely appreciate you being on the Dynasty Podcast as always.
You got it, guys. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck in your leagues this season.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, take care.
That was this week's Dynasty Podcast interactive segment.
Wow, Jay Young, David Richard is freaking awesome. He really is. Is he not one of the 5 best people on this planet?
I couldn't agree more. Maybe even top 3.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So Jay Young, just want to thank you for doing this. I thought this went great. If only things went this smoothly when Bubba co-hosts. you know, things are just so smooth with you, and with Bub, things just are rocky. They're really rocky. So
well, I'm coming for that sweet ass, so watch out.
There it is. So we will be off next week, but returning to your ear holes the following week, which will be after week 2, heading into week 3. Obviously, I'm sure a lot's going to happen in the meantime. And Jay Young, where can everyone get the most up-to-date, late-breaking Dynasty information?
Check the CBS site, check the Dynasty Twitter page, check the Dynasty Facebook. We're global, bitches.
Love it. Love it. Bubba is going to be returning with me 2 weeks from now, and we're going to be joined on the show by one of our 2 NFL player interviews this season. Random guest, Jay Young. Who do you think will be our guest next week? He is an NFL player. Random guest. Go.
He is currently playing for the NFL right now.
You got it, dude.
Is he a kicker?
I'm not going to tell you that.
Damn it. Tom Brady.
Oh, my God. Okay, well, we will wait and... No, you know what? I'm going to tell the people. I will tell the people right now who it is. Bubba Gump Shrimp, running back, Toby Gerhart.
Oh.
He will be joining us 2 weeks from now. Until then, this is Commissioner Scooper.
And this is Jay Young Kim.
Over and out. This episode of the Dynasty Podcast was brought to you by Harborough Auto. And if you enjoyed this show, please show your support by clicking on the like option of this show posted on the Dynasty Facebook page.